There's been some debate over the years about which Dragon Ball villain is the best. Typically, though, it seems to come down to the main baddies of DBZ: Vegeta, Frieza, Cell, and Buu. Now, a while back, I did a video asking which villain was the best, and the comments and polls that I've seen, and the ones I put up on the video, were usually pretty split. Vegeta typically was highly ranked, but seems to get put out of the conversation sooner due to his iconic transition into the hero. Buu is also pretty popular, though he never seems to get as many votes as Frieza or Cell. When I'm asked about this, I usually say that Frieza could easily be considered the greatest enemy simply due to the sheer threat he posed in comparison to other characters on Namek and his role as a personal antagonist for many of the characters. However, Cell has always been my favorite villain ever since he first appeared in the series years and years ago. I think the most significant reason I was drawn to Cell was just how creepy he was. Certainly other villains were scary to watch, but Cell's introduction was straight out of a horror movie. A town that had been reduced to silence, with only piles of clothing left behind in place of bodies. Then when Piccolo shows up to investigate, there is this slow build-up to what the creature actually is. We hear the drip of water and the distant footsteps against the wind, some really good sound design in that episode, and we only see glimpses and shadows. Then, he's revealed to be this giant reptilian bug thing. His introduction is then followed by him literally sucking the life out of some guy until nothing is left. It's probably the most disturbing imagery in the entire Dragon Ball franchise. In terms of narrative, it made things very interesting, and the twists kept revealing more frightening ideas, at least up to a point. Cell being made up of cells, get it, of Earth's heroes always reminded me of the villain Amazo from DC Comics, as he was sort of a counter to the Justice League, although I did discover Cell first, ironically. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a connection, as Toriyama was inspired by Superman in many areas of the story. The thing that really separates Cell from most villains of the series, though, is his calculating intelligence. He acts as a sort of reflection of the heroes for sure, taking on some of their characteristics as well as anticipating their moves. I know some people might not really think about this, but Cell is one of the only villains to use real strategy in DBZ. He had to. For a good chunk of his arc, he was outnumbered and overpowered by at least one person. No other villain has retreated so much in my memory. I kind of respect that though. Cell is a villain who seeks to find a true purpose. He was designed to be a destructive force, and doesn't really desire to overcome that programming. He works hard for what he wants, and struggles to get it. It's kind of this strange existential issue for Cell. Probably the closest a villain comes in this series to getting kind of a philosophical conversation going. In this future, he's the most powerful being, but he is never really able to reach his full potential due to the androids being destroyed. He feels incomplete and seems overcome with longing. Hard to say that I really ever felt bad for Cell, but there is an element of sympathy there that kinda almost makes you root for him a little. He is certainly evil, no doubt, but not entirely by choice. But then again, it does seem that he did come to his own decision and felt a desire to pursue some form of destiny. So there's a bit going on with him there. This idea of changing fate or being limited to our own design is kinda subtly sprinkled out throughout the arc and much of the show actually. Trunks is driven to try and change the course of destiny through time travel, thereby creating a new series of problems. The Terminator inspiration probably also factored into this. The heroes assume the androids are evil. That may not necessarily be true. What causes the shift in these events? Would altering events change those people fundamentally from who they were before they became androids? Did Juro decide to program them differently for some reason? We obviously don't know all the details, but Trunks coming back to kill Frieza and meet Goku led to many changes, including the eventual arrival of the future Cell from the alternate timeline. Much in the same way Frieza was sort of a primary enemy for several heroes for different reasons, Cell functions in a very similar way. He has some really great interactions with the other characters, seeming to know very well how to get under their skin. He has some really good banter. His fight with Piccolo in particular is one of my favorites in the whole series, and he has some really great interactions with most of the heroes. Trunks in particular seems very driven to destroy him for obvious reasons. As much as I liked Cell in his bug form, I feel he kind of loses something with each transformation. He just kind of becomes more arrogant as he grows more powerful, making him more like Frieza, but somehow a little less scary. He does have a cool confidence that is kind of intimidating upon obtaining his perfect form, and his absorbing of people up until that point is some really disturbing stuff. Sadly, the arc gets less interesting once it becomes a tournament. I wouldn't have minded this except for the route that they went down, not really committing to a true tournament arc. Each one of the characters facing down Cell in their own way, or maybe some Cell Juniors, would have been a really interesting way to see how both in terms of personal development and also to show off some new skills. After this, the human characters and even Piccolo would be truly pushed aside from the action. We all know what the outcome of all these fights would have probably been, but I think it would have been more interesting than just skipping to Goku and Gohan. Cell is obviously important for pushing Gohan to a new level of power, but due to Gohan and Cell not having much interaction up until that point, in fact I don't think they really had any at all, there isn't as much tension as in a fight with Vegeta or Frieza. Even so, the final battle with Cell is pretty good, with the beam struggle being probably the most iconic of the show. Of all the villains in this section of Dragon Ball, I was really drawn to Cell's personality and origin. However, I do think that he kind of loses something once he gets his goal, kind of becoming a fun, over-the-top comic book villain. It's not bad, but the menacing horror monster he started out as was kind of even scarier than Frieza, at least in a different way. It's only due to his inconsistency of character and his arc that I can't say he's the best written villain. He's certainly the most interesting in terms of motivation and personality, and the personal connection to the heroes from the early years adds to a potential thematic conclusion to the series' origins. However, he does lose some momentum towards the end. This is in comparison to Frieza, who, though simpler in some ways, works very well for his arc, as everything seemed to be building up towards a conflict with him. Cell may be my favorite villain, but I can understand why some people would choose Frieza. So, okay, he's not perfect, but he is pretty darn cool. Alright everybody, thanks for watching my little video on Dragon Ball. If you liked it and want to see more, please feel free to subscribe and share the video around. What do you guys think of Cell? Is he your favorite villain? Let me know in the comments below. In the meantime, stay magical.